Before we get into it, congratulations are in order. You won 2 Grammys earlier this month, Best Americana Album, Best Roots Song.
Thank you very
Congratulations.
much.
Now, you've had a couple weeks to process this now, and I've read that you're very grateful to just be making music. So this is more than just making music. This is 2 Grammys. How are you feeling now?
It's a really cool thing, you know. We had a lot of fun at the ceremony and saw a lot of cool people and a lot of crazy people, and I mean it was a great thing, you know. It's always fun when you win something like that. You know, that I know a lot of people who I feel like work just as hard and do just as much good as far as making art goes, and don't ever get recognized, you know. So if I were to say I deserve these, I would feel really strange. But that being said, it's an honor, and you know, honors are better than tomatoes getting thrown at you.
Amanda, I'm guessing you were there as well?
I was there.
Yeah?
I was there.
Do you remember what went through your mind when you heard that name read?
Yeah, well, I remember the whole day before and the day of just sitting there thinking, oh my God, what's going to happen?
They didn't even listen to the whole name being read because
No.
it was me and her and my manager and a friend of hers and then a bunch of people from Muscle Shoals, Alabama, where I grew up, because there was a bluegrass band that also won that day that I'd worked with a little bit. And so a lot of us local, you know, people who grew up together really were all sitting in the same location.
Which is pretty cool.
It was really great. It was really great. But as soon as they said the letter J, everybody just went nuts around me. So I immediately started thinking, oh my God, is there anybody else nominated whose name starts with the letter J? Because I'm going to stand up and start
You don't
walking
wanna be
up there
that
and it's not
dude.
going to be me.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then I got up there and they handed me the award, and, you know, they don't give them to you automatically anymore. Like they send them to you in the mail. I guess they spelled a lot of names wrong or something. So they handed it to me, and then they took it back after my acceptance speech, and they wiped all my fingerprints off, and then they handed it back to me for the second one, you know. So it was like the same one, and it didn't have my fingerprints on it anymore. That was kind of a strange feeling.
And I heard you celebrated with chili dogs.
Chili dogs at the Staples Center. That's what they have for food. That, or what else do they have? Pretzels?
Yeah, they had the big pretzels. I think if you were 2 rows up from where we were seated, then you got the good food. And I think we were just barely in the gotta go get your own damn chili dog section. But we went out there. They were really good chili dogs, and we were all dressed up, you know. And then Anthony Mason from CBS comes up and sits with us while we're eating our chili dog, and we're all in tuxes, and she's in her big fancy dress, and we're trying not to get chili all over her lap. But it was a good experience.
It's not caviar, but it makes it more memorable almost.
It does, I think. Yeah, I think it does.
You mentioned the crew from Muscle Shoals being there. You thanked everyone in your hometown. Now, that's a mythical place. Muscle Shoals, all sorts of documentaries about how influential that place was. What was it like for you growing up there?
Well, you know, first of all, I'm really happy that the people who made the documentary were the ones who made it, because there's been people threatening to do it for a lot of years, and I think these guys actually did a really good job. But yeah, growing up, you know, unless you were a musician, you didn't necessarily know what all had gone on in the town. But my friends and I, we started playing early on in bars and restaurants around town, mostly restaurants, because the way the alcohol laws are down there, you can't really have a bar, not on the Florence side of the river. Now, Muscle Shoals has a few bars, but most of what you wind up in playing music are restaurants. That was really good for people like me and Jimbo, my bass player, and Shad, our drummer. You could go into these places when you were underage, and you could sit in with the bands. And so I met, you know, David Hood and Donnie Fritz and Spooner Oldham and a lot of local musicians. Barry Billings was a big influence on me down there. He was a guitar player, and these people would let me get up and sit in with their bands from the time I was 15, 16 years old. And they really taught me how to play with a band and how to listen and how to serve the song rather than just, you know, go up and play as much guitar as you possibly can all night long.
Do you feel like that's the musical lesson you picked up from those guys, how to really serve the song and play with others?
More than anything else, because, I mean, a lot of them were session players at heart, you know. David Hood and Spooner especially. I know Spooner wrote a lot of great songs too, but, you know, most of the work that David did was session work. So the only thing that mattered to him was the song. And you know, him being a bass player, it was about building a good groove and staying in the right spot as far as the beat was concerned, and just serving the lyric and the melody. And he's one of the best at that. I spent a lot of time with him. and learned a lot from him. One thing was to show up on time and always have gear that works, have a good attitude, because there's always somebody who can play as well as you. There might not be somebody who is as willing to work.
Especially in a very musical place like that.
Yeah.
And you were brought into that legacy. You signed a publishing deal with the legendary Fame Studios.
Mm-hmm.
What was that experience like?
It was great because, it was the first real income I had from making music. Before that, I'd worked at grocery stores and restaurants and factories and stuff like that. So it was nice to have, an income from writing songs. But I wasn't really the type of songwriter who wrote for other artists, and that's what they were used to.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, they didn't pressure me. They just let me do what I did, and I wound up working with them for a long time. I think everybody pretty much broke even because I was recording my own material, just enough to pay them back the however much money they were fronting me every month to survive. So it was a good thing.
I mentioned off the top that you're a storyteller. Who are some of the early storytellers that shaped you?
Well, I've always been a really big fan of course, Bob Dylan and Neil Young and Bruce Springsteen, and I think Carole King's a magnificent songwriter, not always in the storytelling vein, but, Joni Mitchell. And I grew up listening to a lot of my dad's arena rock and then classic country music, and then my mom was really into songwriters. So my mom was listening to John Prine and John Hyatt and James Taylor and Bonnie Raitt, who wasn't necessarily always a songwriter herself, but picked really great songs to sing. And so I think my early education musically was a combination of those two things, Dad listening to Queen or Thin Lizzy or Skinner or something, and then Mom listening to John Prine and John Hyatt and stuff like that.
And John Prine you've actually toured with as well?
Yeah, Amanda and I both have toured pretty extensively with John, and got to be friends with him and his family, and yeah, that's sort of a dream come true for us. I mean, he's about as good an example as you can find of somebody who's happy and successful and told a lot of great stories, don't you think?
I try to think of something to add to that, but I can't, except for we get to eat dinner with John Prine.
Tell him about John's pajamas that he has now that he didn't used to have.
He has some cool pajamas. I showed up on the tour opening for him, and I was wearing one of those tiger onesies that were popular for a while.
Okay.
And he said, those are really cool. And I was like, do you want some? And he's like, I'm more of a sock monkey dude. And
sock monkey?
Yeah. It's a...
old school. It's an old school
it's
thing.
It's an old school toy kind of thing.
Okay.
So turns out at the store where I got this tiger onesie, they had a sock monkey one. So I went back to the store and got it. And I left it wrapped in his dressing room. And during my set, he came out to the side
stage?
Yeah, and was wearing it.
So nobody else could see him, but you could see him.
Yeah, but I took a picture, and it is on the internet.
Yeah, there's a picture at our house on the bookshelf of her and her tour manager and bass player in their pajamas, footy pajamas, and then John wearing his sock monkey onesie right there in between them.
That sounds like a fun tour. Okay, so for fans, Jason, your story is one that's well told, but I want to give some context to newcomers. You played with the Drive-By Truckers for several years, lots of success with them. Then you started your solo career. After years on the road, you came to the realization that you're an alcoholic. You got sober. And now this is the second record you've released since you recovered. And in the process, you married your wife, Amanda, and just had your first child.
She had it, but yeah.
That's true. Give credit where it's due.
Yeah, if we could have done it the other way, we
That's
would
the only
have.
mistake in my research. It was Amanda that
He was the one going to the store every night for avocados. So
yeah, but when your wife is severely pregnant or has just had a baby, like going to the store is the most beautiful excursion on earth. 'Cause you're like, you don't get out of the house for a long time around that period, and especially she didn't. But I remember when first we went to the gas station on the corner, the first time she'd gotten out of the house after having the baby, and we got what we needed, and left. And then she said, "Can we go to another gas station?" So we just drove down the road to another gas station. And anyway, I digress.
Well, what's that experience been like for you guys as parents?
Well, it's if I say anything, you're gonna think something bad, but
No,
whatever.
go ahead.
It's
Tell the
like
truth.
if you've ever done any drugs, which I don't do, but if you've ever had any, hallucinations or something. It sort of reminds me of those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like, all your emotions somehow become more enhanced, like, and then you might have a lot more compassion for your fellow man, knowing that
Interesting. So it's
everybody's somebody's child.
it's grown you in that way.
Oh yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I can see that.
And then the whole thing with lamps.
Yeah. Yeah, it's my friend Will Johnson.
Sorry, wait.
I'm coming to the lamps.
Okay.
This will make sense in a second, I promise. But our friend Will Johnson from Texas, who's a really incredible songwriter, he told me, everybody's giving you advice when the baby's coming along, and he's like, it'll be a very psychedelic experience. That's all I'm going to tell you. It'll be a very psychedelic experience. And so we went into that thinking, what in the hell could he possibly mean? And it's true, like the baby gets fixated on these things that humans only get fixated on when they're on LSD or mushrooms or something like that. So the baby will sit and stare at a lamp for hours, and it's not about turning it off and on. There doesn't need to be any entertainment happening. It's just the beauty of the lamp itself. And it made me start to think. You forget how many steps you go through to learn certain things.
It's incredible, right?
Yeah, it's incredible. You hand the baby a toy. First, the baby has to figure out that there's an object that is not part of her hand, that is connected to her hand at that moment. And then she has to figure out that object is not going to harm her or eat her. Mm-hmm. And then she has to figure out that it's a toy after figuring out what a toy is. And then eventually you come to the point where you're playing with the thing. Mm-hmm. But it takes all those steps, and you forget all those steps until you see somebody have to go through them again. Yeah, that's really cool.
I only noticed that once I was in the doctor's office, and they had a chart of what babies learn at different ages. And one of the moments was object permanence.
Oh,
like
right.
that if you cover up this pen,
It's not really
not gone. And I was like, you learned that? That's,
Yeah.
it's wild. Yeah.
Yeah, you're not just born knowing that, and it's there's really no common sense. I mean, there are a few things that like she could dance somewhat. Had a little bit of rhythm really, really early on, which I think maybe, there was head bobbing and she would like shake her hips a little bit, which I think is about as close to common sense as we can get.
That's interesting.
I mean, how to eat if there's food in your mouth, I think is about it. Everything else it's not common sense. We take it for granted, but you have to learn all that stuff.
And we take for granted that this world is kind of trippy.
Yeah,
it is. It's
that's
wild.
what I was trying to say.
Yeah, and I haven't had any of those kind of drugs in many, many years, but it's still sometimes, when you're thinking about what the world looks like through an infant's eyes, it really kind of trips you out a little bit.
So, Jason, you've talked a lot about Southeastern being a personal album and this new one being more storytelling type of album. What are the challenges in writing kind of in someone else's shoes or another character?
I mean, I'm always in the story, and my persona is always going to wind up somewhere in there. So that's really how I keep from writing about things that I don't know much about. It's all at least a little bit autobiographical.
Okay.
But that being said, you can use that in a way that's more allegorical. You can tell one story that on a different level explains part of your own life to you. There are songs that are about two completely different things. There are a lot of those songs, and I really like those a lot. They're not easy to write. They're not as easy to write as songs where this happens and then this happens and then this happens. But I don't really find the challenges of writing from an untrustworthy narrator's point of view or writing something that's strictly fiction to be very different from the challenges of writing a factual or autobiographical song. I think it's always the same challenge. It's really, is this language as concise as I can make it? Is it as refined as it can be? Have I done enough work on this song where it's actually saying what I want to say without any fat left to trim away? And then melodically, I think that's something that gets really underestimated and underrated as far as people's enjoyment of songs. The phrasing, the way the melody and the lyricism of the words actually connect is very, very, very important. I mean, that's why you can, fall in love with a song that's not really saying much of anything at all. So you have to be careful not to focus all of your attention on lyrical content alone, and actually realize that people like songs because the fact that those words are put to melody in a good way makes it easier to remember them. That's why we had songs in the first place, so we didn't forget things,
Not just what's told, but how it's told.
Right, yeah, the story, the subject matter, it's important, but at best it's only half of a song,
How hard is it, though, to find these characters?
Oh, that part's not hard at all.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, if you're paying attention, there's a lot of stuff to write about. A lot.
And I understand that Amanda helps you a lot in terms of trimming the fat, keeping it concise. Is that?
Yeah, she's great about that. She's great about
if
that.
it needs it.
I mean, there's a lot, sometimes she'll come to me with a song that's completely done, and I won't have any suggestions for her, but I think it's really nice that we have the kind of communication where we can do that and not get our feelings hurt too bad over it.
That's not easy.
No, it's not. But we started out from that place. We started out doing that for each other early on.
Giving that kind of feedback.
Yeah, and there's no reason not to trust each other. We have no other interest except for what's best for the song. It's not like...
Right. There's not ego getting in the way.
When you can trust that in each other, it's a lot easier.
I think so.
It is. Yeah, it is, and it's possible, we'll say. It can still be difficult sometimes, but the difficulties come in when we have a disagreement in taste or disagreement in the structure of songwriting. When she says, no, this works, and I say, no, it doesn't work, and then we'll argue about that rather than, why don't you write a song about your ex? That's a good way to wind up getting yourself blocked up. That's just as bad as like if you're with another songwriter.
At least when we're arguing, though, about stuff like that, we really come with all of our... We have some real good
We have
defenses
reasons,
and stuff, yeah.
And it becomes more of a debate than an argument usually. But, I mean, you could say, I love you, so everything you do is genius. And that's terrible. That happens to so many songwriters. Like they put people around them who just say, yeah, you did it, so it's brilliant. And then all of a sudden they're not brilliant anymore. Or if you're in a relationship like that, it's like, you can't write about these things because they hurt my feelings. It's like, well, what did you sign up for when you wanted to be a writer? You've got to let that person get their voice heard and get their feelings out. It's really important. You can't block them up with your own ego or your own hang-ups.
It's still rare to find, though. Honest feedback, period, let alone from a partner, from someone who's, invested on another level.
Good songs, hard to find.
That's true.
I've been through some workshops, poetry workshops, and too, so, like, sometimes it takes people a while to get used to that kind of stuff, and Jason did that kind of thing, too, and then he'd come sit in some of my classes, and I think there were a couple of things that got us,
through that
in the safe, for it to become a safe kind of
situation.
Yeah.
We're never as brutal with each other as her professors at University of the South were. Like, I've seen them wad up poems and throw them at students.
It was awesome.
Pretend to be snoring on the desk halfway through the reading.
But you have to do that to people because they need to get better.
They need to get better, or they need to get somewhere else and do something
Well,
else.
at a certain point in your career, too, you really value that. I mean, because
that's
it
gold.
is really,
That's gold.
It is gold, yeah.
Because it's hard to find, and it's the only way to get better sometimes.
I find in the characters on this album an essential dignity in these characters. Dignity in ordinary characters. Is that, I'm guessing that's important to you.
It is, and I like that better than celebratory, which I think is something I said early on about this album, probably because I was tired of doing interviews that day. But I like the word dignity better in that situation because I think probably, simplifying all of it a lot, Southeastern had a lot more to do with the acquisition of that particular thing rather than the
acquisition of dignity
of it. Yeah,
okay.
I think because, well, Southeastern even has the line, no one dies with dignity on that album. I didn't think about it till just now, but, it's about, I think, the things that you trade in for that, to be a dignified person, to have power over yourself, really, in a lot of ways, which is a big part of what I think dignity is, to have control of your own urges and emotions. But I think something more than free probably begins from that point, because I was a lot more comfortable in the world. And I think the songs reflect that, being as how it's a record of events as much as anything else.
Yeah, I see in certain songs, the dignity in the day's work, the dignity in the putting in the effort to be a good person in a day in very ordinary ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I'm drawn to. I like songwriters like James McMurtry and Springsteen does it too really well, and Randy Newman and Tom Petty, people who talk about people who might seem simple, or ideas that might seem simple in their songs, but they really aren't simple at all.
I want to read something for you, Jason. This is what somebody on the website Reddit wrote about your music, if it takes a lifetime. I don't know if you've come across
is this one of those like mean tweets?
It's not.
What is Reddit? Is that like Snapchat?
Oh, you don't know Reddit? No, Reddit is like a big, massive website. It's like almost an aggregator for the whole internet, basically.
Okay.
Like people post about everything on there.
All right.
This is what somebody wrote.
He's been on Twitter too much.
It's the opposite of, well, it's not the opposite of Twitter. Let's be honest, it's the internet still. But but this is what somebody wrote about your music, about the song "If It Takes a Lifetime" in particular. They wrote, "Jason Isbell is a hero of mine. I discovered his music when I was getting sober, and his story really resonated with me. I'm also a musician, and it can be tough being sober in that scene. Isbell has been a real role model for me." What's it like to hear that?
Oh, that's great. That's really one of the primary reasons why I work as hard as I do at writing songs and traveling around and playing them. It's at the end of the day, I think that my main focus is to connect with people and tell them what my life is like. Maybe they'll feel like we're not so different. So yeah, that's a great thing. I mean, it's sometimes you get tired of talking about alcoholism and sobriety and the steps that it takes, and the embarrassment of talking about who you were then. But it's worth it if people out there hear that and they feel a little bit more motivated. I'm not under any. I've not convinced myself that I'm actually getting people clean or getting people sober, because I know that they have to do that for themselves, and I don't assume that any art that I create has that kind of power. But if it can make them think a little bit more about not having a drink, or if it can make them feel a little bit more comfortable just to talk about their own experience, then it's a really good thing. It's worth the time that I have to spend, talking about how much of an asshole I used to be and what steps I went through to change that.
What do you think, Amanda, when you hear a quote like that?
I think that it's what I first thought was that it's true. Like the scene is, it's like you can, drugs and alcohol are always available, and it is kind of those temptations are there every day, but it's really something that is easy to get to in the music business, I guess. Yeah. Then I was thinking about, then also to tell you what I'm thinking about. And then I thought that the guy, like to have a role model, that's pretty cool. I don't know where he's from. Does it say where he's from?
I don't know. I can find it.
No, Auburn, Alabama, and his name is Charles Barkley.
Stop. I don't know. I don't know. I always look at people that I admire, and then I'm just like, I'm going to be just like that person. Then I'm like, I hope you can keep doing it, because that guy's going to be real sad if you fall off the wagon. It's a lot of pressure.
That also helps me, that kind of pressure, because I do think sometimes, it would be great. Or I'm at a party and I'm feeling super anxious, and I'm thinking, man, it would be great if I could just have a drink like everybody else at this party. But then sometimes you think, well, how many people would it let down if I did this, whether they knew it or not? How many people would I be bullshitting if I said, I've been sober for 4.5 years or whatever, and it wasn't true,
There's a good kind of responsibility sometimes.
Yeah,
Is that what you mean?
You've got to challenge yourself. You've got to find ways to make yourself more responsible. It's really, in a lot of cases, the whole deal, as far as I can tell, is about tricking your mind into doing the right thing. Whether it's getting up and getting some exercise in the morning, or not having a drink, or not running around and chasing after people you shouldn't be chasing after. Sometimes you just got to convince yourself of the real reasons why you want to live the right way.
You've talked a lot about the importance of gratitude. What's the most grateful you've felt in the last year?
Oh, when the baby was born. without question. Without question. I mean, to Amanda, first and foremost, because that is not an easy process to ferment one of those things for 9 months and then go
I
through
think
the
it was
process.
fine,
of
except
having
for
it.
that 3 weeks when our AC went out.
Oh yeah,
that was
in the
pretty
summertime in
crappy.
Tennessee.
Tennessee, yeah.
But yeah, first of all to her, and then also to the doctors and to, my parents. All of a sudden, like I had this much more acute realization of what it had taken to raise me when they were teenagers, starting out, and just to everybody in general. I mean, it was at that point in my life, I was ready to have a child, I think, and I'd never been there before. So I was grateful to everybody who had assisted in that and helped me get ready to actually have a family. But yeah, that everything else is just really nonsense compared to that.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
is, and it's all fun, and I absolutely love my job, and I would do almost anything to be able to create art and only do that for the rest of my life, and that's why we work as hard as we do. That's why we're out here with the baby on the road and all that kind of stuff. But really, for me, when I had a kid and was ready to have a kid, and had a family, it made everything seem, like it wasn't such a big deal, good or bad.
Perspective.
I think it's a good thing, because then you can just never get too far down, never go too far down the rabbit hole, as long as your family's all right.
All right. Well, table time was great. Thank you.
Table
time.
time.
Table time.